So, oh, I discovered yet another funny bug. You know how you can like zoom in a picture? Well, for some reason, some company in Cupertino decided, oh, nothing. It didn't work in full screen on my computer. Anyway, it works in full screen, which is awesome. So it means means I get to be the one who zooms and calls some people. The first one I'm going to call is that person who decided he was not going to jump.
You mean the guy with the broken toe?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that broken toe. Okay, that's a good excuse. That's a good excuse. Well, you could have jumped on one. True, the toe. The other one is Andreas, my colleague, is actually over years always asynchronous. Last year he was too early. This year is too late. So you have. I mean, I know you like to code asynchronous, but this is about jumping. I think I have an advantage because I'm the one calling drei, so I know where I'm gonna jump. That's probably why. And then there's this amazing art trick here. YMC. They're gonna cut the live stream at YouTube if I start singing copyrighted material. Yeah, and for the rest, it's once again another awesome picture. There's a big difference with the picture last year, except some people are different. Usually, these are the cranes in the back. It looks very, very professional, like we're building something at 7p. Except it's the company next door building something. Yeah, except that we will have also an animated GIF version of this, because Alex was telling me we have like how much gigabyte of? 83 pictures, which represent an amount of like 2 gigabyte or yeah, 2 gigabytes of files. So we will make a 2 gigabytes animated GIF, post it on Twitter. And Twitter will go down. Anybody remember, by the way, it doesn't happen anymore since 3 or 4 years, but anybody remember the whale? The fail whale on Twitter? This is awesome. I'm sad that their servers actually work now, because it used to be the best part of Twitter. All right, yeah, this is not my computer, so I will come back later with my computer for the closing slides. For now, what I will do is we will go to going into settings again, probably because I'm in full screen. I have too many screens. Let me close this. Where's the button? Up. So, exactly. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, coming all the way from London, over Bonn, over Italy, over anywhere in the world, Gianluca is going to speak to us about server-side Swift, so big round of applause.
Does this work? Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. So, hello everyone. I'm Gianluca. I've been working as an iOS developer for too many years, since 2009, more or less. And recently I got interested into server-side development with Swift. I'm curating a newsletter about the topic. And today, it's also my topic. I'm also talking about server-side Swift. Although this is not a technical talk. This is more a general overview of where we are in terms of server-side when it comes to Swift. Last year, Ian Partrige and Hans Ravens, I hope I'm not murdering their names, did speak about it, and you will see that I will repeat some of the concepts they mentioned last year. So usually when I talk to people about server-side Swift, I get one or two reactions. Either they say, oh, cool, I didn't know you could use Swift for that. Or they go, I'm an iOS engineer, why should I care? And either case, at some point, it comes up the topic, why should I use Swift for server-side? So let's try to answer these questions. First of all, why web development? You know, first of all, it's fun. You can build your own products. You can build your own iOS app with a backend written in Swift with the same tools. But there is a deeper meaning to me, and that's that mobile development is changing. When I look at the App Store and its history, the first apps on the App Store were merely utility tools. And most likely, most of the apps today are still utility tools, apart from social networks and all the way you connect with other people. But at the time, when I started programming back in 2008, 2009, most of the apps barely connected to the internet at all, or they used to connect to the internet just to sync some data so that you can access it on other devices. So it was a very much offline experience. Today, instead, most apps don't even work without an internet connection. So the vast majority of apps and games today, I see them as just mere front ends for the back end. And these, of course, has meanings, as profound meanings on our profession, because going forward, we will probably require the skills to address some of the challenges on the back end. If you remember the opening intro of WWDC this year, this is something that could happen for real when the internet goes down at some point. So again, to me, it's critical that we acquire the skills to be able to work both on the front end and the back end, whether the front end is a website or an iOS app. So the next question becomes, why Swift? There are already many server-side languages. Java, Ruby, JavaScript are only a few of the most popular. And now we got Swift as well. And each language has its own pros and cons. So I'd like to start with some downsides of using server-side Swift. First of all, although Swift is open source, and of course this is not true, most people I talk to, especially those that are not familiar with iOS development, believe that Swift is an Apple platform-only language. And so they come with a prejudice about whether they can use it for the server or any other kind of web of development in the first place. But that's, of course, not true. A more down-to-earth issue is that it's still a young language. That comes with its own set of problems. For example, there's limited support on Linux because the language started as for iOS and Mac applications, and therefore the initial focus was on the Mac. On Linux, of course, the language works perfectly well, but not all the libraries that comes with it are completely or fully supported. For example, Foundation is only about 75% compatible with Linux. And again, being a young language, the ecosystem is quite small, and this is especially true on the server. While on iOS, there has been some time, and we've got pretty much a package for anything we like, a library for anything we like. On the server, the number of packages is still quite limited when you compare it with other languages. So what are the upsides? What are the advantages of using Swift on the server? Well, first of all, we've got a thriving community. We're all part of it. iOS developers, Mac developers, anybody who was involved or who has been involved in any development for Apple platforms knows that and is part of it. Developers can be really flexible when it comes to using one language and one set of tools to work on multiple platforms. And that's a key goal to me in having Swift as a programming language. We can see it becoming one language to rule them all, but even better, it's just a way to share the tools and skills across multiple platforms. Other languages tried this, of course. Java and JavaScript, for example, are probably the most notorious one. Java tried to be the language that had to be used everywhere, including browsers. But of course, that didn't happen. That's not to say that Java isn't a good language or cannot be used elsewhere. But In fact, it's still used today for Android development and server development, especially in the enterprise. But it's quickly losing ground to more modern, faster languages like Kotlin for Android, languages like Scala on the back end. JavaScript has gone through a similar process. It always received quite some hate. If you remember, a few years ago, there used to be languages like CoffeeScript that tried to replace it, or at least try to replace how you program using JavaScript. Just compile, write in some other language, and then compile to JavaScript. And that's still true today with TypeScript. However, JavaScript in the last 16 years managed to conquer the world, because it's basically the only language you can run in a browser. But you can also use it for server-side development using frameworks like Node.js, and even native apps using React Native, for example. This quote by Chris Lattner, I suppose, especially resonates with me because I feel the same. And of course, he was referring to Swift being able to eventually replace JavaScript. And how can we do that? Well, all browsers have agreed to implement WebAssembly, which is an assembly-like language for the browser that allows us to use languages like C, C++, and eventually Swift, so compile languages and compile them into this assembly-like language that runs in the browsers. And again, all browsers that are going in that direction. Another advantage is cost efficiency. This is something that is, let's say, is divided in two main categories. I already mentioned that we can use the same tools, the same skills, and we can even reuse developers, so to say, when working on the front end and the back end as well. Some agencies, for example, can limit the number of developers they require, or at least the amount of idle developers they have. For example, Hans Ravens last year mentioned that 82% of his company's cost, more or less, is developers. And being an agency, it means that if a bunch of clients come to you and request all of them mobile applications, you're going to have your backend guys sitting doing nothing, and vice versa. If you require at some point to have more web work and web development going on compared to mobile development. But there's another point that IBM really likes to talk about. In fact, I'm gonna reuse a couple of slides from them. And this is server costs. All iOS developers I met really like to brag about how fast and secure Swift is. And this is true. If we compare it to most of the other languages, especially those used on the server, we can use that Swift runs faster than most of them. Same is true in terms of memory efficiency. Both these numbers are especially important on the server, where cloud providers, like we heard from James today, charge based on the resources you use by the hour. But Swift also comes with an intrinsic set of tools and syntax features that make us happy. Overall, it's just a modern, safe, and easy-to-learn language. And if you don't believe that it's the most loved, but of course we do, we are at a SwiftConf. It's the most starred language on GitHub. And if you look at this picture, it's also one of the most contributed to compared to the number of branches and forks of other languages. According to Stack Overflow, it's also the most, well, not the most loved, but among the most loved. This year is number 4. Last year it was number 2, or if not the first, I believe. Finally, if you're still not convinced, EPO and all the major frameworks for server-side web development with Swift, came together to compose this work group focusing on server APIs. You can find it on swift.org. It's an official thing. So let's now have a look at what the current state of affairs is in terms of server-side Swift for real. And first of all, I'd like to talk about frameworks. Until last year, I would have considered 4 major frameworks for server-side development with Swift. This year, I'd like to cut it down to 3. Zio, unfortunately, didn't take much attention and wasn't able to get much traction anyway. And the good thing about all of these web frameworks is that they are open source. So you can go play with them, commit to them, change them as you please. Let's start by talking about Perfect. Perfect was the first web framework for Swift. The project started even before the language was open sourced. And it's supported by a company called Perfectly Soft. It's a startup. It got some VC funding, and they're also supported by an agency, Canadian agency, I believe. As an early starter, it got some advantages over the other frameworks we're going to talk about. Most importantly, it's the most feature-rich, and it's also the most performant. So if you care about performance and having the fastest possible framework, probably Perfect is for you. It also comes with a Mac app called the Perfect Assistant that actually works with all frameworks, not only with Perfect, that helps you create, manage, and deploy your applications. But Perfect is not that perfect. It has a quite cumbersome syntax, and it's very hard to work with as soon as you move from hello world to anything else. In fact, I want to show you how to write, according to Perfect's documentation, a little class returning hello world on a browser. This is just the HTML for hello world. That's all. It's quite some code. Next, Keetoowah. Keetoowah is, of course, maintained by IBM. We heard James talk about it a little, and Ian last year. But the most important thing to me about Keetoowah is not Keetoowah itself, is the contributions that IBM has been making to the community in terms of the work they've done on Swift itself, the language, and the core libraries. For example, we can attribute to this team most of the Grand Central Dispatch implementation for Linux and some of the APIs regarding URLs in Foundation. That said, Keetoowah is a great framework, and especially great when you work with IBM services. For example, if you use Cassandra, probably Keetoowah is the best tool you can have to integrate with. Or if you already use IBM Bluemix to deploy your other services, perhaps Keetoowah is the best tool for you. It comes with a lot of learning materials and examples. There are many tutorials online. And Paul, of course, has given you for free some of his books. He also has got a book on Keetoowah. And I really recommend you go and read it. Finally, Keetoowah comes with a set of good tools. It also comes with a Mac app like Perfect to help you deploy your apps and also manage them. But it also comes with a set of command line tools which are quite useful. The only problem about Keetoowah is that for some reason it doesn't have much adoption yet. Keetoowah has the smallest community to this day. I don't know why, to be honest. If you ask me, Keetoowah is a great framework. Just for sake of comparison, this is how you will print hello world as a string according to Keetoowah's documentation on a browser. And finally, we've got Vapor. Vapor is by far the most popular. It doesn't have as many stars on GitHub as Perfect, but that's mostly due to the fact that Perfect started earlier. It has the largest community, and it's also my personal favorite. To me, it has the best CLI. You can start a project very quickly by just typing Vapor new and the name of your project. It also has tools to deploy and manage your apps in that CLI. But most importantly, perhaps, it has the easiest syntax. So if you're not really familiar with with many concepts that come with server-side development, if you're just starting out, Vapor makes it really easy to do so. It also comes with a flexible architecture. It uses protocol-oriented programming very much. In fact, it's probably, willingly or not, the one that uses the hexagonal architecture model very heavily. It's so flexible so that you can use Keetoowah's engine inside of Vapor. Although it has many benefits, Vapor is not the most performant one. Keetoowah beats it. Perfect is the most performant, as I mentioned. However, Vapor is also the only framework, and perhaps this is the problem, I'm not sure, that strives to be 100% Swift. It only has one library for C compatibility, especially when you use Postgres. This is how you print hello world. You can see how small it is. It's only 4 lines, 5 lines. This website, server-side Swift.racing, has this nice graph. It's also about to be updated and shows you how these frameworks have been growing in terms of users just by measuring stars on GitHub. And you can see that Vapor is growing really fast compared to Perfect or Keetoowah. Keetoowah, as you can see, is mentioned, but basically it's been flat for a while. Now that we know what we can use to build web apps using Swift, we need to put it somewhere, right? So let's talk about deployment. Basically, your only option is Docker. That's not to say it's the only option. We will see a few more. But Docker powers most of the other tools anyway. So yeah, what I'm saying is, if you can, learn about Docker. And although there are some tools that hide this implementation detail, so you don't have to worry about it, but I really suggest you go and have a look at what Docker is and how it works. If you prefer a more native solution, you can deploy on Heroku, both using Docker, but also using build packs. Each framework has its own build pack that instructs Heroku on how to build and run your application, so you can go that way. Of course, you can use IBM Bluemix to deploy your applications. And not only if you use Keetoowah, but any framework, really. If you use Vapor, the Vapor team has been building their own cloud solution based on AWS and Heroku. They completely hide the fact that they use Heroku. It's called Vapor Cloud. It's currently in beta. I've used it and it works really well. It's really stable. In fact, the agency that's backing Vapor is using Vapor Cloud in production for all of their clients. And of course, you heard James talk about how you can use serverless technologies to deploy your apps. There's only one catch. You really have to strive for having a good set of automated tests that run for your app, especially when it comes to Linux. As I said, not everything in Foundation is compatible with Linux, and this is true also for other libraries. So it's really important that you test your applications on Linux, and the best way to do so is via automated tests. And again, there's one problem with that. On Mac, XCTest can find your tests automatically no matter what. On Linux, you have to tell the build system XCTest what your tests are. This is a little piece of code that I found somewhere on the web some time ago that you can include in your apps. And this way, anytime you forget to tell the project what tests run, you get an error. Let's now talk about tools. Swift PM, the Swift package manager that comes with Swift, is the glue that brings everything together. Is at the core of using all the web frameworks and any package. So you don't have CocoaPods, you don't have Carthage like on iOS, but the equivalent in Swift PM. It's really simple to use. It has its own pros and cons, but mostly it works really well. And you can use Swift to generate a project, an Xcode project. So you can use Xcode and any other IDE. In fact, my next topic is IDEs. Xcode is, of course, great. And as I just mentioned, you can create an Xcode project out of your server-side app. And it's a completely throwaway project. In fact, anytime you change any of the packages, or if you change some of the resources, you probably want to regenerate, or you probably have to regenerate that Xcode project. However, Xcode is quite limited when it comes to supporting other languages, even things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, for which Xcode has support, don't really work well with this IDE. A good alternative is Appcode. Again, since you can generate an Xcode project, you can just use Appcode. It's lower, but way more powerful. JetBrains, the maker of Appcode, also has CLion, which is an IDE that is supposed to be for C, C++ languages. However, it has a Swift plugin, and you can use it on both the Mac and Linux. If you prefer a more simple solution, you can go for text editors. You don't have to generate an Xcode project, so you don't have to care about that. And Atom and Sublime Text come with a good set of plugins for web development, as well as for Swift, although something like autocompletion and click to go to a symbol either don't exist or don't work well. Packages. I've already mentioned that Swift, being a young language, especially when it comes to server, has a limited support for packages and what you can do. If you compare it with Ruby, where everything is a gem, and everything has a gem, there's a gem for anything. Pretty much, as we will say, there's an app for anything. Anyway, there are more than 300 packages on GitHub marked as server-side Swift. Most of them are from frameworks like Perfect and Vapor or Keetoowah, but that's just a tiny portion. Most of them are user-contributed. And in fact, IBM, again, has created a nice tool called the Package Catalog, which helps you find the packages you may want to use in your projects. Anyway, I want to invite you, my suggestion for you is to really start contributing to server-side, but even if it's not meant to be a server-side project, if you can create anything that does not require the iOS SDK, do it. And support the Swift Package Manager. It will help you not only on your iOS app, but also on the server. So to summarize, Swift is a great language for the server. There are 3 major web frameworks you want to take into account: Vapor, Keetoowah, and Perfect. They're all good. They all have their pros and cons. Again, my favorite is Vapor. Keetoowah is also great. Perfect is the most feature-rich, the most performant, but the syntax and how you can use it is not that great. Anyway, I would recommend you try them all, and you can make up your own mind about which one you want to go for. I didn't mention this, but last year we used to have Open Swift Standards, which was a project that was meant to have everyone in the community come together and decide what was the goal for creating HTML, a common framework for HTML requests and response and things like that. In a similar way as on as it happens on the Ruby community, where they have Rails as the major web framework, or simpler frameworks like Sinatra, but they all rely on Rake, which is like this common set of protocols implemented. So you can swap in any framework you like at runtime. But that today became the Server APIs workgroup. We basically replaced it. Finally, there are tons of contributed packages and tools. I again invite you all to start contributing to it. And if you're still thinking, how can I actually use server-side Swift at my own company or for myself? It doesn't really matter. Just go and use it. You can start as big or as small as you want. In my opinion, building a small microservice, especially if you use serverless architectures, is the best way to start. Or you can build your own website. My own website is built using server-side Swift. In fact, I've got some success stories for you. If you were at the WWDC this year, this was a great app that was quite popular among attendees, and its backend is written in Vapor. Tiny Faces is a small website for a sketch plugin. You can basically get random faces of people for your designs. And this website is also written using server-side Swift. Perhaps you've seen this in the last few days, WTF auto layout. This small tool helps you debug auto layout problems in your iOS and Mac application. You can just paste in the error you get and press go, and it will get you a nice description, both visual and described in words, what your auto layout problem is. This is also written using server-side Swift, of course. And if we look at the web frameworks, for example, Vapor Cloud is built by using a set of microservices, and they use server-side Swift for many of them, but they also use Go and Ruby when necessary. Very briefly, looking at the future, Swift 5 is most likely coming with a new concurrency model, probably built on top of Grand Central Dispatch, but so that we don't have to use Grand Central Dispatch necessarily. It will probably, if everything goes well, my hope is that it will come with a async await similar to what you have in Node.js and C#. And finally, we might even be able to replace JavaScript in the first place and go the full stack from the server to native apps to browsers using Swift when WebAssembly is fully supported by all frameworks, by all browsers, sorry. So to wrap up, Swift's future is bright, and I believe that server will be a big part of it. Thank you. Here are some resources you can find. My newsletter, the server-side APIs workgroup on Swift.org, the blog where I occasionally post, the links to all the web frameworks, Vapor, Keetoowah, and Perfect. And again, them, but on Slack.
That's an interesting way of finishing your talk, like say thank you, but then I still have some slides.
Yeah, yeah.
Think about it, the next presenter. Before I hand the mics to the few people.
Think about the questions.
Yeah, well, I already see at least one hand and others are coming. But I found it very interesting because so last year we had the first talk about server-side Swift, and it was pretty young. Swift 3 wasn't even out. And so I myself started looking at the three options, like you said. And it's interesting because we didn't speak about it with each other, but I have exactly the same conclusion than you in terms of the three. Looked at Perfect, I was like, what the hell? Because it's just way too complicated. You see that it's powerful, but that's the problem of potentially of being too powerful. And then really like Keetoowah, and also especially really liked IBM and the community and all the people at IBM, obviously. But then discovered later on Vapor and liked the simplicity, and also liked things like Fluent, which is like, how can we put it, like a data model? RAM-ish.
Yeah, it's not only for SQLite languages, SQL languages, but also works with MongoDB. So it just abstracts away all the database operations. And in that regard, I actually prefer also leave their templating languages over Mustache or Markdown for building web pages.
So I wasn't that crazy about that templating language because I thought Mustache is going to be the better path, and Mustache works with Keetoowah as well. Yeah. But I wanted to do something with the WordPress SQL server database, and it ended up being not trivial to find a way to interact with SQL Server, except until I discovered Fluent, which makes it super easy, actually.
Yeah, something to note is that none of the Swift web frameworks are really focusing on templating or supporting HTML. And for good reasons. Most of the modern web applications today are written using JavaScript and some JavaScript framework like React or Ember.js. Yeah. So perhaps rightfully, they're focusing on JSON most than anything. In fact, I spoke with people from all of these frameworks, with IBM, with Vapor, with Keetoowah, with Perfect. And going forward, the first thing they're going to do is supporting the codable stuff for JSON to make it faster and Swift 4.
Okay, I'm going to hand the mic to other people because I could probably speak about that subject for the next 2 hours. All right, so Alex, you are the first.
Thank you for the summary. That was very interesting. But for me, what would you suggest to embark on this server-side Swift journey? Where should I start? Is there any suggestion, or should I just try all of these frameworks?
So I don't want to try. I don't want to try to be too biased. But again, my favorite is Vapor because it's very simple to get started. So especially for iOS developers, I go in that direction. If you are more familiar with how servers work, if you have a history of using building for web frameworks, then Keetoowah is probably the best. So it depends on your taste and what you want to try to do. In terms of what projects you can start with, again, I started with my own website. I'm starting building a more complex service, let's say. And in my company, well, not in my company, in my client's company, we build a small microservice using server-side Swift.
Another question? All right.
Yeah, you were talking about something that I was not aware about, like with WebAssembly and Swift support is already starting and supported by some brother, or not
as far as I know, there's no support for WebAssembly yet, but there are talks. At least I heard some people trying to build something for it.
There's no project yet, like on GitHub or whatever, or started about that portage.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I couldn't find any before the conference. I just tried to look for it. But there might be some small project that's just starting out. Anyway, this is something that will probably be meaningful in 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, sure. Like full stack.
Yeah, really full stack development.
Just a question about the frameworks and the databases supported by them.
Sure.
Especially the Swift types. Which databases would you recommend that are complementing the Swift types?
Yeah, so in terms of database supporting Swift types, I don't know. Perhaps you can try something with MongoDB or at least non-SQL frameworks trying to build your own schema. But no, there is no solution right now. All of the frameworks, as far as I'm aware, Yeah, as far as I'm aware, all the web frameworks are actually using the more traditional databases, MySQL, Postgres, MongoDB, SQLite. No, not as far as I know. MySQL seems to be more popular, but actually, probably the most popular is Postgres. But still, SQL is very simple to set up.
So to complement on this, this is one of the examples of the thing we were speaking about before. Fluent with Vapor, where you define your class, your model, but obviously you map between whatever Swift string and MySQL string is.
Yeah,
that's one of the way you do it. But it's also still a lot of boilerplate. And in anything that I looked at, ORMs were always too boilerplate-ish for me, coming from a past, like 5 years ago, Ruby on Rails world, where it's more obvious. Anyway.
Yeah, it's true, especially migration. I find when you have to migrate your database, writing the migrations with any of the frameworks is more complex than it should be.
Just for the sake of kind of show of hand, who have tried something with server-side Swift at all for the last whatever year? Okay, that's not a lot of people, but that's what I expected. I should have raised my hand as well. Now, let me see if anybody tried Perfect. You have to raise your hand. Okay. I'm sure you're going to raise your hand 3 times as well. Anybody tried Keetoowah? That's more hands. So, and let's see if anybody tried Vapor.
Yeah,
that's about the same amount of hands. And because I was surprised that you mentioned that Keetoowah wasn't known enough or successful enough or whatever.
Yeah, most of all, it doesn't seem to have the traction that I expected from Keetoowah. I don't know why. Really, it has the smallest community on Git. If you just look at the numbers on Slack, it has the smallest community.
Yeah.
And although it comes with a lot of tutorials from other people, there seems to be a small, very loyal set of people from what I can see externally. Perhaps James can add a bit on that if he has some insights. Instead, Keetoowah, if Perfect is anything I found about Keetoowah was sponsored by them. So that doesn't seem to be a huge community. However, they do have quite an active Slack channel.
So it's great that there are 3 different guys working together on this group API. At the same time, there are days where I would wish that Keetoowah and Vapor would
merge,
marry each other.
Me too.
Because I can totally see the benefits of one, the benefits of the other, and I'm like, because we have to. At one point, you have to make a decision. To which I know Frank has been working with Keetoowah, for example, and at one point you have to make a decision because there's a whole set of the code that you write that is not going to be compatible between those different frameworks.
Talking with Ian, for example. I was very vocal in this sense at the AltConf last year, not this year, saying, I would really love for Keetoowah to have the kind of syntax and some of the tools that Vapor has and vice versa. I believe that, if you can come together, that would be awesome, but I guess it's not happening soon.
Okay. Another question? Otherwise, I have myself one last one, but I'll give first the mic to one. Coming with you. With the cable is following me. All right.
So, hello, and thanks for the overview. It's very instructive. The other frameworks I've been using, Vapor a little bit, and this cross coding between iOS and server-side Swift. It's actually quite a little bit difficult in the beginning because this, what we were talking about yesterday, this idiomatic Swift, for example, in the server side, you're always throwing stuff and throwing errors, and you don't want to throw functions in your, in your iOS app. So it's a little bit difficult. So how do you see, really maybe front-end or iOS developers shifting to, or if you actually kind of have to change your mindset to code like a back-end developer?
I believe you have to. The biggest change that I had to make myself is thinking in terms of the application. You know, when you build an application for iOS, you expect one user to be using it at one time. And if it crashes, no problem, right? They can just restart the app. But on the server, one application is going to run for thousands of people, hopefully. And if it crashes, you have to go and restart it, and it will take some time before you discover that your server is down and before you can restart it. So it's kind of a shift in that way. And in terms of the meaningful writing, semantically correct Swift, you can already see how different the three frameworks are. They are some similar in some ways because they tackle the same issues, but at the same time you can go as far as you as you can. In my opinion, Vapor has the most Swifty syntax. Perfect. It went quite the opposite direction. Vapor does a good job in between. It's not great, but it's not that bad, right?
Okay,
So,
I
yeah.
have one last question. Is that you talk not only about server-side development, but you talk on purpose, I think, about web development, and you talk quite a bit about we're dancing with each other with the game. Quite a bit about client-side development, so to say, and replacing JavaScript. So I was really yes.
Yeah, let's
So
do it.
what is because this is really the first time that I hear. I could imagine that, but I didn't know that. I hadn't heard about WebAssembly, and so what is your hopes for the future? Do you think it's going to be something that at one point is going to be in WebKit first, and then maybe in the other browsers?
I couldn't say no. They all agreed. So, but
For WebAssembly, but not necessarily for Swift.
Yeah. I don't believe that anytime soon we will see like an Apple official project to bring Swift on the browser. I may be wrong. They may be working on it right now. I don't know. My hope is that they are, of course. But if not, even if it comes from the community, I see Swift going certainly in that direction in the next couple of years. And I hope that some nice framework like React comes for perhaps in the same form for Swift.
I mean, because I was a little bit disappointed this year at WWDC because there was, correct me if I'm wrong, no talks on server-side Swift.
Yeah, that's correct.
Compared to last year where there was at least that talk with IBM, but I think another one. So it sounded to me that the excitement from Apple itself was not there anymore a year after. But hopefully I'm wrong. You have a question? The last one?
Could be the other way around. There are so many people at Apple working on server-side migration of Apple, so nobody to talk to there.
Maybe they're too busy converting.
We had a little peek on that yesterday when the developer website said we will be soon back online. It's probably because they were working on getting rid of web objects and making everything Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. People had all their addresses in Russia.
Oh, something that I forgot to mention about Keetoowah, if you want to get started and you're doing iOS development, of course, is that Keetoowah comes with a really nice command line tool that helps you, if you create your web service with Keetoowah, it helps you either create the web service in the first place by giving a spec, or creating just a framework that you can embed in your iOS applications. I think also with CocoaPods or Carthage, I'm not sure. That can just help you call your web service, call your web server, perform any operations you defined APIs for. So that's nice if you want to get started.
Okay, I got only so a round of applause again.
Thank you.
So I got only a few things to say before I can release everybody. Obviously, if you have to catch a train, just go now and run. If you don't have to catch a train and if you have time tonight or in the next hour or two or whatever, hang around and we will probably go out whenever we're done taking apart a few cables here. The next thing is I'm not sure about that yet, or actually there's one thing which I'm sure is next week on Tuesday there is the keynote from Apple, and at least if you're in Cologne at that time, at least Mobile Cologne is gonna have like a gathering of folks, and I'm still not sure if we will do this today. I have to discuss with that about that with the people from 7P. But just check it out on Twitter and whatnot. Maybe we will be in the same room Tuesday evening as some of you. Now the last thing is I'd like, and obviously everybody else can go outside and drink one last beer or two last beer or three last beers. Not four, please. I want to take picture. I want to call, first I want to start by calling three very important people. So there are three things that I want to do. I want to call Andreas. If you're there, you can join here. And the other Andreas, which is there also. And Oli, which should be somewhere, Pichi. And after that, I would like to have my one of my unofficial photograph to take a picture with two groups of people, which are very important for this conference. It's obviously the speakers. And then, yeah, so let's start, come on this side. Let's start here. So if you've seen Oli walking around like a crazy guy, the 2 days long, not 2 weeks. Next year we make it 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. And do you want to say hi?
Hi.
That's one of our designers, but two days a year he's organizing a lot of stuff and moving around plates, and it wouldn't work without his help. So thank you very much, Oli. And then, as usually, everybody has to have at least two Andreases with him. So I already introduced the conference with Andreas Muth, basically my boss. Some of you know the shortcut BFF, Best Friends Forever. Andreas is actually BBE, Best Boss Ever, until now. And the other Andreas Kern. Thank you again, Andreas, because he organizes the whole stuff with me also, and basically does the whole ordering of the food and whatnot, which is kind of
Great
important.
Food.
Yeah. So now I would like to call also the other folks from Seven Principles. This is something I haven't done last year, but I would like to actually have a picture taken with all of those crazy guys, and that includes the guys from Frankfurt. So unless you're very shy, please join me here, because I want to show some of the great folks at Seven Principles, and I would like to have a pictures with my kind of my professional family. So come here, join here. This is where you will discover like half of the room is from 7P. No, it's no. But a lot, actually, a good amount of people. And actually, we can turn off the beamer, the projector. I like the fact that you have to press on the arrow. And yeah, this is best this way. So that's a good amount of people. And let's take a picture. Yeah, we have to. Okay, let's do this again. Yeah. Make it until you make it. Right? That's good, right? The last one I do it the Objective-C way. But stay here. I'll fix the rest. Because now I need you to get out. Because now I'm gonna call the speakers. Please, speakers, all the speakers, and I want an amazing round of applause also for all those people that you've seen 2 days long. That is obviously not including the two speakers who already left yesterday, Nicholas and David, sadly. But all the others should be somewhere around. I don't know where TJ is. He's probably somewhere. James is coming to us, and then both James and TJ. I'm looking at the picture. Is everybody here? Like, I have this guy, I have this guy, I have this woman, I have this guy, I have this guy, this guy. Manu left already from Microsoft, sadly. So everybody's here, and let's...
10, 9, no.
We're only 7.
Yeah, that's
Well, we're 7. Yeah, I know.
all right.
Who's going to be disappointed? There's no Jeff.
Huge job.
Well, no, he left. Oh, okay. Yesterday, he left yesterday. All right. So thank you very much. See you next year. Luckily, hopefully, and spread the word. And to the stream, bye-bye. Thanks for following on the stream. And but it's better if you're inside.